Hi, and welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. I'm your host, Cindy Howes. We're on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. Okay, talking to Oliver Wood today. Growing up, Oliver Wood thought he'd try out the bass guitar, but after 6 months, he handed it to his younger brother, Chris. That's right, the Chris Wood, virtuosic bassist of acclaimed Medeski, Martin and Wood. Even at a young age, the brothers' styles were pretty clear. While Chris was getting intense about the bass, Oliver was meandering on the guitar and forging his own musical path. He ended up in Atlanta and eventually got a spot in Tinsley Ellis's band, a very well-respected blues player. Oliver was playing guitar and singing background vocals, but soon enough he was shifting to the spotlight. It turns out that Tinsley was a really important mentor for Oliver. He taught him the ins and outs of the business and encouraged him to sing. After touring hard for 15 years, Oliver and his brother met up again at a fateful Cher 2004 bill. He sat in with Medeski, Martin and Wood, and the brothers immediately felt that familial connection through their performance. They decided to keep up playing together and formed the Wood Brothers. Coming together in the band, Chris and Oliver discovered that the music of their folk-singing father, Bill Wood, was acting as a huge inspiration. Bill spent time on the folk circuit surrounding Cambridge, Massachusetts in the 1950s, performing with legends like Joan Baez. He would settle down with a career as a biology teacher, but kept the spirit of folk music alive for his boys. Oliver talks about how forming a band around that sound made him appreciate his father in new ways. 7 albums later, and the Wood Brothers are one of the most beloved bands in the Americana community. Oliver, who is motivated by connection and community, spent 2019 co-writing with various touring musicians making their way through his home of Nashville. While this project was just for fun, he found the results inspiring enough to make a solo album during the 2020 pandemic, resulting in his debut record, Always Smiling. Oliver talks about choosing joy, connection, and feeling grounded through meditation, which has helped him immensely through the last 14 months. We'll take a listen to a song from Oliver's new solo album. Let's hear Fine Line, and then we'll get to our conversation with the lovely Oliver Wood on Basic Folk.
Tell me what's the reason nobody is satisfied. Jump around from one to another. Don't they know it gets cold outside? It's a fine line between love and lust, between truth and trust. Yeah, dreams and dust. Yeah, it's a fine line between a hope and a prayer. Someplace or nowhere. Yeah, well, it's a fine line. Fine line. Yeah, we're walking it all the time.
Well, Oliver Wood, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm happy to be here.
Your parents came from artistic places. Your dad played folk music and your mom was a published poet. And I'd like to hear about each of their backgrounds, starting with your dad, who worked as a biology teacher. But I read that he was like in the 50s. He was a folk musician and playing with people like Joan Baez. Mm-hmm. What did his musical life look like before he pursued science and teaching?
So, when my dad was a teenager, he got really into music, especially folk music. And his dad was a doctor and scientist, so my dad was sort of on a real education track. He ended up going to Harvard and becoming a biology professor, as well as an author of a lot of biology textbooks and molecular and cellular biology. So pretty intense stuff. But parallel to that, throughout his college career, he really had a music career going. He had a band called the Raunch Hands that were on Epic Records. And he also was friends with Joan Baez and her family, and he plays on the first Joan Baez album. He had a radio show.
Where was this all happening for him?
Well, I think it was sort of peaking in Boston when he went to college at Harvard.
Oh, all right. That's cool.
Yeah. So
playing at like Club 47.
Yeah, Club Passim and things
Club
like
Passim,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. And so but he had a huge, and still does, he's in his 80s, but he has a huge repertoire of folk songs. Like he knows everything that was being played back in those days, during that scene. He has that whole repertoire in his head. And he also got into writing songs, and even since he retired and since he's been holed up in the pandemic, he's written some songs. So, but anyway, he was a real folk nut, and he really knew all the folk songs. He would sing around the house and sing at campfires, and was also kind of a great entertainer. Like he could just rip through songs and just I don't know, just had a lot of confidence in himself when he did that. And he's kind of a quiet, shy guy, but when he starts performing, he just has this killer instinct. So that's kind of my dad's side. He could have pursued it professionally, but I think he went more into the education route, and that was his thing. But he's always played. And then my mom was less so musical, but more word oriented. So she was a published poet, and she, I think, got her degrees in literature when she was young. But then later, after being a mom and raising a couple kids, while she was doing that, she got more interested in poetry and becoming a writer. And so she went back to school and studied poetry, and later taught poetry and published a couple books. So.
Nice.
Both of my parents had amazing talent at what they were doing, and I think that I totally took it for granted. I think my brother and myself both, we just thought, that's what people's parents do, and so it took me a while to really appreciate the influence they had. It was much later.
Mm. Yeah, like reading about you now, it sounds like you do have a deep appreciation for poetry, and in thinking that you came to songwriting a little bit after you got started in your music career. Like,
true.
Particularly, like, what was your mom's influence on you when it came to appreciating the written word, and how does her writing impact yours?
Yeah, well, like I said, it was like when I was a kid and she was really digging into it, I didn't really pay that much attention, to be honest. And she died in 2007. And, I was always supportive and impressed by what she was able to do. But it wasn't really until after she died that I really got it, sadly. Mm. But, being around her while she had ALS. And so she was, she, in the span of a year and a half, she went from relatively healthy 68-year-old. And then in that year and a half where she deteriorated, we got to know each other a lot better. My brother and I would sit with her by her bed, and she would tell us, we would record her just giving us her life history.
Wow.
And she was a refugee in Germany during World War II. She lost her dad. She lost her sister when she was pretty young, not even 10 years old. So she had a very heavy childhood, and a lot of her writing reflects that, and a lot of beautiful but sad stuff in her writing is really powerful. And it really hit me after she told those stories, and I really got some details and some understanding. And so I don't know how directly she influenced my appreciation for words, but she, I think of like writing songs as a very cathartic and therapeutic thing to do, whether you're writing something about something sad or difficult, or whether you're cheering people on and making, something uplifting. Both of those things can be very therapeutic and connective. So, that's some stuff I got from my mom's poems. And yeah,
it's amazing. All right, so Chris is 4 years younger than you.
Yeah.
But you had a closeness as young kids, like before you moved out and went to college. You bonded over music. You spent a couple of years playing music together, like casually in the garage. How do you think music helped you originally establish a bond with Chris, and how did music help you find connections with others at that age?
Yeah, at that age, it was interesting. My brother's quite younger, but he's also a much more disciplined dude than I am. Like when he started playing bass, he got really serious really fast, while I was still kind of just messing around with guitar. And so it put us on actually a pretty equal level, even though we were both teenagers, and I was like 17 and he was 13. And in just those years, we had a 4-track recorder, and we used to just make stuff up, and we would appreciate my dad's record collection together. That was a real bond. Ooh, check this one out, and let's learn that song. So that certainly connected us back then. And I'll include this because even though it's not exactly your question, but when Chris and I left the house, although we both pursued music, we really went in opposite directions and grew apart quite a bit. Just because we never saw each other. We lived 1,000 miles apart, and we were in completely different circles. And so we really did grow apart as brothers. And when we did get back together to start the Wood Brothers, it was the music that really did it. We had this in common. We were able to, because we're also very different people. And I think that's a great thing about music is, if you're at a concert with 1,000 people, there might be a variety of political views in the audience or things that could be divisive, Mm-hmm. And all of those things are put aside when you have the music to bond over, and that's one thing I love about a live concert. Or a small, a group of people sitting in a living room playing music, whatever, if it's a porch or it's a stadium, it's all about those people being connected. So I think connection is the best word to apply to all these things, is that the music is for doing that. That's the best thing about it, is it's a connector. It's a language that everybody understands at a certain level. And if you're a musician, you understand it maybe on I don't want to say a higher level, just another level that allows you to communicate. And of course it translates to people who like to listen.
Yeah. And reading about your history, it seems like connecting with others is like a huge thing for you, and doing so through music, and like on this new album and everything. So it's like,
yeah,
it's nice to hear you talk about that.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like that's sometimes we lose sight of just sort of basic ideas, and there's probably other words and other ways to describe it. But I certainly have been very burnt out on like traveling and being a touring musician before, and question like, what am I doing this for? And it's the actual show and the actual interaction, and then people even commenting and saying, your music really made me happy, or it got me through a hard thing. That's when you realize, oh yeah, this is important work, and the connection part is the best part. It used to be like, ooh, I get to have people clap for me and meet girls and stuff like that, and it, those kind of things wear out, but the connection part never does. That's the number one thing.
When did you first realize that?
I think I first consciously realized it maybe definitely within the last 10 years. Just
pretty recent.
Yeah, fairly recently, where I now it's kind of my mantra: connection. Like we talk about it all the time, and partly just to keep it on my radar and remind myself. But but it's something that you do take for granted, and that's what's cool about other things beyond music, other kinds of art, or meditating, or wrestling with your kids, or whatever. It's the connection.
Yeah. So to talk a little bit more about connection in terms of like your instrument. So this is funny. Originally, you got a guitar when you were 10, but you were like, I don't care about this. So you weren't interested in it. Then you attempted to pick up the bass.
Right.
6 months later, you're like, forget this. Here, Chris, you have this.
Right.
So Chris went off and became a virtuoso, and you went back to guitar.
Yeah.
I read after you were inspired to pick it up after hearing Jimi Hendrix and B.B. King. So how did it feel for you to finally be able to connect with the guitar?
You mean way back then?
Yeah.
How did it feel? Felt pretty great. Yeah, and just like kind of anything else, it's kind of cool to when you figure something out. And I guess you could be a mechanic or you could be just about anything. But when you dissect what people are doing and you realize, hey, I might be able to do this, then it's exciting. It's fun, It's huge growth. It's like exponential growth. And I gotta say, I realized later too that I've always been drawn to maybe simpler, raw and simple music because of its accessibility. Like I'm not huge on the virtuoso shredder concept because I'm thinking, oh, I'll never be able to do that. But if I hear something really stripped down and simple, I like Lightning Hopkins was a record that my dad had that I always listened to, and I was like, I think I could do this, and I was able to, I wasn't super ambitious, but I could do that, I'm not as good as him, but
You see yourself reflected in that.
sure,
That's
sure.
cool.
Yeah.
So how has your guitar playing and like feelings about being a guitar player evolved over time, and how did it change when you started to sing and write songs?
Yeah, I think like a lot of musicians, I went through a huge arc of learning and appreciating, and it's funny because when I started out, I was really into just basic blues guitar, and then I got really into jazz and things that were more complicated and technical, and then eventually came sort of full circle back to playing blues and stuff. And interestingly, when we started the Wood Brothers, even back full circle to more like what my dad does. Like we got into more folk-like instrumentation and sound, and stripped down. I played in a 6-piece band for a long time called King Johnson. That was before the Wood Brothers, and that was a lot more. There was a lot more to that, and I think I came full circle and went down to something more stripped down and simple. But I think my approach to guitar, what I've come to appreciate about my favorite guitar players is they just have sort of a thing that's recognizable and unique that they do, and it's like their personality. That's like a one-of-a-kind thing. So I really like that. When you hear B.B. King, you just recognize it right away. It's like someone's voice, It's like when it's their voice.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So I think I ended up, I gotta say, practice a lot less and just trust that, I have a thing that I do, and it's not amazingly technical or dazzling, but hopefully it sounds like me playing,
Yeah, you mentioned when you started the Wood Brothers and you kind of like went back to what your dad was doing. How did like playing that style of music that you play with the Wood Brothers and even on your new solo record make you appreciate your dad, his music, his guitar playing even more than you had previously?
Yeah, it's just cool because my dad got really good at certain things. And I think sometimes as musicians, when we're really excited about music, we try to get good at everything and master everything and sort of water down whatever might be unique and personal about what we do. So, and I'll say this too, my brother helped instill a spirit in me of, trying to be experimental and inventive and creative, and combining that with the simplicity. Like, what can just 2 guys do, or now 3 guys, but when Chris and I started, it was just a duo. What can we do with an acoustic guitar and an upright bass that's a little different for everybody else, And it's choices like, no, we're not going to do that. That sounds too much like such and such. Let's get a little weirder than that,
So like you talking about that and how there was this like simplicity and this experimentalism that Chris brought to the Wood Brothers. It's kind of like, I wonder like if that experience kind of helped you be uncomfortable musically with Chris.
Yeah. And I, you know what it is? It's all about getting outside of your comfort zone. You know what I mean? It's like, if you rely on what you've done before too much, it's too comfortable, and it's not inspiring. It's not inspired, you know? So sometimes, and we talk about this all the time, like picking up a guitar that you're not familiar with, or I really like old guitars that maybe have a story behind them. So if somebody loaned me this guitar the other day, it's an old cowboy guitar. Well, nobody's going to see this, but so
I will describe it. Looks like it's gone through some stuff.
Yeah, it's from the 30s, and it has this cool cowboy picture on it. And it's not an expensive guitar. It's a cheap guitar by the standards of that day, but it's a really cool guitar. And I find if somebody lets me use something like that, or if I change the tuning on my guitar, or if I play a less familiar instrument like piano or ukulele or something, it takes me out of my box and puts not only my fingers in a different frame of mind, but my brain. So even lyrically, I get in a more inspired state of mind where you get inspiration. And that's from, like you said, being a little uncomfortable.
Yeah. It's cool to see how with you there's like a parallel between limitations and being uncomfortable and like making it work together, you know, because you're like, I'm a limited piano player, but I'm very uncomfortable and I'm going to make it work.
Yeah. Yeah. I like it that way. And the word uncomfortable is strangely to me I would even change that to inspired or playful or like, exploratory.
You're making it less scary. Good job.
It's non-threatening. Well, but I really do feel like when you're inspired, you're like a kid. You're discovering stuff. You're playful, right? And it's because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what to expect, which can be scary, but it can also be exciting and inspiring. So
you've just shifted my perspective entirely.
Just put a positive spin on it.
I wanted to hear a little bit about Tinsley Ellis. You got a spot in his band. Yep. He's a very, very well-respected and loved blues player. You were playing guitar, singing backups, and it seems like he was a really important mentor for you. He taught you the ins and outs of the business and encouraged you to sing. What did knowing and working with Tinsley Ellis do for your confidence as a musician, and how did your performance change through that experience?
Oh, it was such a formative time for me. Tinsley gave me my first real gig where I got to go on the road and make a living and do it full time. And just that alone, just being able to do it in an organized and professional way with someone who's already really good at it was a huge confidence builder and definitely eye-opening, just learning what that lifestyle is like and what you can do. And I don't know, he was great. And I think some of the biggest things he did, he didn't have to do, but he encouraged me to sing. He would let me take guitar solos, otherwise I was just there to be a supportive guitar player. Mm-hmm. But he would give me features, and at one point he said, "You're going to start singing one song a night." And it was his show, but he would let me sing one song every night. And just to get me used to it and get it in my blood a little bit more. And so, I mean, that's huge. And the fact that he let me do that just gave me a lot of confidence. And, there were a couple other people along the way too, beyond that, who same thing. I think having mentors like that at a time like that is huge,
It's huge, and it's so rare.
Yeah.
Like listening to you talk about Tinsley Ellis, that's amazing that you experienced that. I wish more people got a chance to experience that type of mentorship. Yeah, it's so important.
Yeah, and you learn, it's so interesting because I learned lots of cool guitar things because he's a great guitar player. So I learned a lot of guitar stuff, but then there's all the other parts about performing and talking to an audience and maintaining a van and things like that that are just like things that you take for granted. But yeah, you just sort of soak it in, and to be that close to it. And honestly, over the years, when I think back about it, we have our idols that we learn. I learned how to play some B.B. King licks and Mariah Cooter and people that I admire, and emulate singers, your favorite singers. But honestly, your real teachers are the ones that you play with on stage, and that could be somebody like Tinsley, or it could just be a bandmate over the years, or for me, my brother, or John O'Ricks, who's in our band. Those guys are huge influences and teachers all the time.
So, all right, you and Chris spent 15 years apart playing music, doing your own things.
Yeah.
You grew apart as brothers. You grew apart musically. But in 2004, here's the story, that your band opened for his, King Johnson opened for Medeski, Martin, and Wood.
Yeah.
You sat in with them, felt great, and you thought you should do it more. You formed the Wood Brothers, and you started playing an entirely different type of music. And something that you said was a cool thing about not playing with your brother for 15 years is that you had both kind of gone off and not only figured out music, figured out the business, you figured out your own person. You matured on your own.
Yeah.
What was that like for you to reconnect as musicians and as brothers, knowing that?
Well, it was great, to, like you said, I gained a lot of confidence from Tinsley, and then everything that happened with in between Tinsley and the Wood Brothers, and really grew up and found an identity. And I think the same thing happened with Chris. So there was 10 or 12 years there where Chris and I didn't play together, and just sort of went to the school of, how to be a grown-up and how to be a professional musician and stuff. So I think those are years where you shed a little bit of baggage as you gain some self-confidence and identity. And we always get asked in interviews, do you guys fight like the Black Crowes or like the Kinks or all the famous brother bands? The Everly Brothers were notoriously always fighting. And we're always like, well, actually, no, that's not the case with us. It must be because, a lot of those bands grew up playing together and just went professional right out of living at home with their families. And so all that baggage is still there. And I feel like we got to work out a lot before we did that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I don't know if you know the band Tegan and Sarah, twin sisters. Yeah, so they have a lot to say about this issue that you're talking about, because they went right from high school to just being in a band together. But then I also just interviewed, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Brother Brothers.
Oh, they're awesome.
Yeah, twin brothers. So they have a very similar path where they didn't play together for a long time. And then
I didn't know that. That.
Yeah, similar brothers.
Yeah, how about that?
They're great. Yeah, I interviewed Adam.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know them personally, but I've met them and I've heard them play. I heard them in a house concert once, just in a little house, and it was fantastic.
That's a good way to hear them.
Yeah.
Okay, so I read this thing, an interview where somebody was asking you about a theme of a particular Wood Brothers record, and you were talking about how, in doing publicity for records, there has to be a story about the album, which you say that's not necessarily what we're interested in while we're making the record.
Yeah.
So then there's a lot of post-reflection of a common theme or what the writing is actually about. So how has being forced to analyze and look back on the songs you've written maybe helped you understand yourself more or grown closer to the music?
I think that's one of the things I love about this process is, just creating things, and ideally not trying to control them. Ideally work with inspiration and without judgment, and sort of discover your songs and follow them instead of trying to lead them and control them. And so trying to be as true as you can be to what's inside you and what subconscious magic could come out. That sounds a little woo-woo, but I really feel like...
I appreciate woo-woo.
Well, the side of the brain that I want my songs to come from my subconscious. I don't want it to be crafty. I want it to be inspired, if that makes sense. And I feel like when we do things, whether it's writing or whether we're scientists and we have problems to solve or whatever we're doing, we have a part of our brain that's very logical and organizes things, but then we have the other part that's much more childlike and inspired and playful and draws from your subconscious more. So I feel like that's the part of the brain that I mostly want my stuff to come from. And oftentimes that logical side of the brain really gets in the way.
Yeah.
You need it to organize things and create structure, but it also tends to be judgmental and controlling. It is fun then, assuming that's the general process that, we always have to use the logical side of the brain to finish things and organize them and make them complete. But if I don't judge it too much and I don't worry, well, what is that song about? It doesn't really matter, as long as it feels good, as long as it has emotion in it. But it is cool to go back and then look at all these songs. Like, wow, look at all these songs I wrote about, coming up with a pattern. Oh, I seem to be writing about lack of control or grace of some kind, but seeing patterns in the songs, and then saying, wow, that's inside of me. That's coming out, and that's weird or cool or creepy or whatever it happens to be, whatever pattern it happens to be. So, and just seeing common themes is cool.
Must make you appreciate that kind of like subconscious part of your brain a little bit more. Like, the both sides converge in that process.
Yeah, I'm super nerdy about that stuff lately. I've really studied it in terms of songwriting, at least, and read a lot of biographies and a lot of interviews with songwriters and found patterns within them. People like saying how when they get stuck on something, they go on a walk or they go on a drive. So a lot of my best ideas will come when I'm just on a long drive or if I'm just walking. And somehow the act of doing something like driving or walking can distract your logical mind enough and occupy it so that your inspirations come. The other part of your brain can work on problems and solving problems and stuff. It's always working. So anyway, I've learned things like that I like to apply to when I get stuck. I'll do stuff like that, and it does work.
Right. Oh, that's cool. Okay, new album is out. This podcast is coming out after May 21, so it was Always Smiling was released on May 21st.
Yep.
The new record is very community-oriented. You have many guests on the record, like Phil Cook, Susan Tedeschi, John Medeski, to name a few. And your son is on the record?
My son Kieran plays trombone on one of the songs, yep.
Your wife designed the cover.
Yep.
How did gathering these people together strengthen your feelings towards community?
Well, we use the word connection a lot. And, the beautiful thing about the Wood Brothers is that we are kind of a little family, and creatively speaking, we are too. We just know each other so well, and it's so comfortable. And here we are again with comfort. But just before the pandemic, I started getting interested in, hey, to cleanse the palate, I would like to collaborate with some other people outside of the Wood Brothers and, try stuff that I wouldn't ordinarily get to do, or collaborate with different writers or musicians who come through Nashville, and I can have them in the studio. So that was kind of sort of exploring the rest of the music community, because when you're in a band, you're kind of in this bubble. And so it's kind of fun to reach out to the community that's always there, but you never have time or energy to work with them. And the pandemic really allowed me to do that.
What was that experience like of writing with new people and making those new connections? I was thinking about, it seems like you and Phil Cook have a real sweet bromance going on.
Total bromance, yeah.
Yeah. It's really fun to watch from afar.
Yeah.
You guys are both very joyful people and musicians. So what was it like to be able to connect not only with Phil, but to be able to connect with new people in that format?
Well, it was great, and it was kind of cool because it was a mixture of new and old people. Like some of the people I wrote songs with, like Chris Long, who lives in Indiana, but he was a buddy when I lived in Atlanta. He was in my band King Johnson, and was another mentor who really encouraged me. So going back and writing with somebody like him, and then somebody like Phil, I've only known for the last couple of years, so he was sort of a new guy to try stuff with, which was great. Carsey Blanton was somebody else I've known for a long time, and we've collaborated a little bit before, but this was just another chance.
She's wild.
She's great. And then, Susan Tedeschi I've known forever. John Medeski, I've known him forever. So some of these people I go way back with. It's just a variety. It was nice.
Yeah, it was cool to like read about and listen to the record of the mix of like old friends and new. It sounds like you kind of like threw yourself a This Is Your Life party on an album.
Yeah, it kind of was. It kind of was like that, yeah. Yeah, I have such a variety of people in my life that are just, that I really love musically as well as personally. But like, there's some young guys that played on a couple of songs. Rick Robertson and Aaron Lipp and Nick Falk are, guys that are 25 years younger than me or half my age, but they're incredible musicians. And I produced a record for them with their old band a while ago. And just cool to like go with guys like that and create something with them and have them be involved and add their kind of energy into it. And then reunite with somebody like Chris Long, who he and I spent 12, 15 years touring together, but have now been apart for 15 years. So
Chris is from King Johnson?
Correct. Yeah.
Let's get my facts straight.
Yeah.
I read in an article that you are a longtime team player.
Really? A longtime team player?
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I agree with that. I'll tell you, I didn't mean to make a solo album when I started collaborating with people outside of the Wood Brothers. I didn't think, I'm going to make a solo album. And I just was doing it for fun and to do it. And during the pandemic, I acquired enough songs where I was like, this is an album. I'm just going to make an album. And so, a solo album, it's got my name on it, but the truth is what was fun about it and what really happened was I collaborated with people. It wasn't exactly solo, you know what I mean? So, it's a little bit lonely. Like, I guess I had moments where I was like, I have to make all the decisions. And I was stressful, and I didn't like that. I missed the team, having a team. And I did have some great teammates to help me produce the album and make the music and write some songs. But, having just my name on it was a little bit lonely. So yeah, team player is right. I like collaborating. I like working with people and connecting with people.
And the process of writing these songs, we talked about, it sounded like in 2019 people were stopping by whenever they were on tour, you'd invite them to co-write. The process of writing these songs sounded loose and easy. And you said you'd be surprised at the music you write and the chances you take when there's nothing at stake.
Yeah.
So what did you learn from making this record about dealing with uncertainty and living in a crisis? Global pandemic, perhaps?
I did. I took up meditation. I've always meditated off and on, but I got really serious about, no matter what, when I wake up, I'm going to meditate every morning. And
how long?
Just like 15 minutes, 15 to anywhere between 15 and 30 minutes, but usually 15 minutes does a lot for me. So, do you meditate?
I did at one particular time,
but
now very occasionally.
Yeah, it's hard. It's a hard habit to keep, but somehow I learned a lot, and I did some guided meditations, and I read some things about it. And
do you have a meditation hero?
Not necessarily. No, I'm not a meditation nerd. But But I've learned a lot from a lot of different people. But I will say there are things that I've applied to music and to life that I think have come partly from meditation, which is that, it's just such a lesson that we aren't in control. And the whole pandemic thing, all of a sudden it felt like, oh, now we're really not in control. But we never really were. Like, we never really know what's going to happen every day. We think we do. So one of the foundations of just mindfulness meditation is that you can't stop bad things from happening. You can't, what's the one? You can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf. That's one of the cheesy ones. But it's totally, that's the whole thing about everything, is it's not about control. It's about adapting,
Yeah.
So I like that for music and creating too. It's like, nope, you're not in control. You have to take things as they come and work with them and discover them. And that can be applied to everyday stuff, You can't help it. It's raining today. You can't go outside and play. And so you got to learn something fun to do inside today. And something like that, I love that idea. So, okay, that gives you some sense of control if you have that skill, or what seems like a skill.
Yeah. You seem like you have that skill.
Yeah, some days pretty good.
Some days you do, some days you don't.
Yeah.
Okay, what is your relationship to happiness? Have you always been so positive, and why do you choose to make that energy so prevalent in your songs?
Do you think that that's very prevalent in my songs?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Am I wrong?
No, I'm glad to know that. I just haven't. Yeah, I guess you're right. I think that sometimes it's one of those just curiosities. It's like, why are we happy when we're happy, and why are we unhappy, and why can't we control it? And this pisses me off, it's frustrating, or isn't it awesome? Or so it's a lot of angles on happiness. So I don't know. I think about, the older I get, the more I think about what am I supposed to do for the limited time that I have left? And I'll never forget, I read a thing like a poll that was taken for a bunch of senior citizens. What was your biggest regret? You're in your twilight. What's your biggest regret? And every one of them said, I wish I hadn't worried so much, And that's something I think about all the time. It's like, it's such a waste of energy to worry, which makes you unhappy. So it's related in that regard. It's just anxiety that we all have because we're concerned. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're always concerned. So I'm always looking for ways through meditation, through music, to be unconcerned, and which usually just means being present and in the moment. And I am not a master at all. I'm super early in my research, but I'm getting there.
Yeah, me too. Sounds easy.
Sounds easy, right?
Yeah. Just, I also read, and I couldn't think of a question other than I just wanted to know more about it, that you label yourself as a terrible empath.
Terrible empath, meaning terribly empathetic, right? Not the opposite.
Right.
Like I am, yeah. Really? You read that?
Yeah. It was about, you were talking about your kids and how you kind of want to save them when you see them about to fail.
Yeah, I'm helicopter parent. And I've gotten a lot better at that.
Oliver Wood, you are such a helicopter parent. Just looking at you, I can tell.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally am are you hungry? Well, are you hungry now? Well, what about pizza or something? I'm always like, yeah, I go to, and so, yeah, I to a fault sometimes, but it's funny, you oftentimes your strength is your weakness and vice versa. So I think it served me really well a lot of times, and it's also bit me sometimes too. So one of those things.
Would you label that as anxiety?
That's an element of it. Part of it is love. Part of it is anxiety. Yeah. Is lack of control or wanting control, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
Great. Well, before we go, would you participate in the lightning round, please?
Lightning round, bring it.
All right. What is a song that makes you cry every time?
Please Send Me Someone to Love by Percy Mayfield.
Ooh, good one. Who is your guitar hero?
I have to say Snooks Eaglin, New Orleans guitar player.
All right, we're going to go out on a limb on this one. What is your favorite scented candle?
Favorite scented candle? Burnt almond. No, I don't. I just made that up. Hopefully that's not one that sounds gross. I'm going to say I don't love scented candles. Smoke?
Like when you blow the candle out?
Yes.
And the smoke, yeah. That is a good scent. Beatles or the Rolling Stones?
Ooh, somebody did this yesterday to me, and it was Lennon or McCartney, and I'm like, And I'll say the similar answer, it depends on the day. It depends on the day. When I was a kid, it was all about Beatles, and I still love Beatles, but today I'm feeling Rolling Stones because there's something about I like how the Rolling Stones are a little less pretty, the music is sloppier, and I like sloppy music.
Because the Beatles are for the good kids, and the Rolling Stones are for the bad kids.
That's right. I like those bad boys.
I heard a radio DJ say that one time, and I've like repeated it probably 50 times. It's a good line.
That is a good line.
What's one product you cannot live without?
Chapstick.
Whoa, that's a serious response.
Yeah, right away.
Another question about crying. What's the last time you cried watching a movie or a TV show?
I don't remember. I'm going to say movie. I don't remember what movie.
Oh, you're like, pass. Okay.
Yeah,
I couldn't hear you. What is your most shameful quarantine activity?
Probably Netflix. Netflix Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
What's that?
Actually, that's on Disney Plus. Sorry. It's a TV show spin-off of the Marvel movies. That my kids got me on it, and I'm kind of hooked. Yeah.
Okay, and then what is your most respectful quarantine activity besides recording an album?
I would say meditation and exercise.
Oh yeah, good answer.
Very
okay,
sensible.
This is the last one. Where do you want to go once travel restrictions are lifted?
I want to go to Red Rocks Amphitheater in Colorado.
Who are you seeing?
Actually, I'm going to play there.
You want to play yeah, okay.
Yeah, but I'd go see somebody too. And I want to go to the beach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is your beach?
We go to a place called, I don't want to say it because then other people will go there. It's a cool place. It's in the panhandle of Florida. It's called Cape San Blas. And it's a little cape in the panhandle area of Florida.
Oh, nice. Great. Well, that's it. That's the lightning round. Thank you so much for talking.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thanks for good conversation.
Basic Folk This Week produced by John Nungesser. Alex Stanton of Townspeople composes our music. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cindy House. And if you like this episode, I encourage you to share it with a friend or a family member or somebody that you are just getting to know. It might be like a fun, how do you do, to share this episode of Basic Folk with them. You can find this podcast wherever you listen or at my website, cindyhouse.net. And we'll talk to you next time. Okay, bye.